Hey everyone, and welcome to Crime Stats Daily. This is a channel where we go beyond the headlines to examine the facts, the statistics, and the stories behind crime in America. Our goal is simple: to separate myth from reality using reliable data and credible research. If you enjoy fact-based crime analysis, please subscribe and join me here each week as we delve into the numbers. Now let's get started. Now, in a previous episode, we discussed why some homicide investigations become cold cases and why some victims and suspects remain unidentified for years or even decades. We looked at the challenges investigators face when evidence grows old and witnesses disappear, and the technology simply isn't available to answer the most important question: who was the victim or who was the suspect? Now, today's case shows how that can change. Now, on August 26th of 1972, a teenager searching for chitin bark near Bandon, Oregon, made a startling discovery that would launch one of the state's longest-running unidentified homicide cases. Hidden in a brushy, wooded area just off Highway US 101, investigators found scattered skeleton remains. Nearby were several articles of clothing and a set of denture plates, but nothing that could identify the victim. Now, the evidence revealed something even more disturbing. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a natural death. The victim had been shot twice in the head with a .22 caliber firearm. And from the very beginning, investigators knew they were dealing with a homicide. But there was one question they couldn't answer. No one knew who he was. Now, one thing that we need to keep in mind is this was 1972 when the remains were discovered. So there was no DNA profiling. Missing person databases were very limited at best. There was no Name Us. And for those of you unfamiliar with Name Us, that stands for National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. It's a free nationwide database funded by the United States Department of Justice that helps law enforcement, medical examiners, coroners, forensic professionals, and families compare information about missing persons with unidentified human remains. By bringing that information together in a national system, NamUs has helped identify victims and reunite families across the country. Now, the other thing that was happening in 1972 is that their records were largely paper-based. And then dental records only worked if there was something to compare them to. Now, for the next 54 years, investigators tried everything available at the time, from dental records, of course, to traditional DNA testing, but every effort failed to identify the victim. And at the time, the best estimate was that the man was older, somewhere between the ages of 50 and 80. Now, no missing person report matched this person's remains or the information that the investigators came up with. And newspaper appeals produced nothing. So then the case went cold. Now, in 2025 and 2026, advanced DNA work finally put a name to those remains. Armes Henry Lahti, born in 1909 in Astoria, Oregon, to Finnish immigrant parents. He was a first-generation Finnish American. He served in the U.S. Navy during World War II from 1942 to 1945. After the war, he worked as a commercial fisherman and was known along the Oregon coast, including the Charleston area of Coos County. And although Mr. Lahti's remains were eventually entered into Name Us, simply being listed in that database wasn't enough to identify him. It took advances in forensic genetic genealogy and modern DNA technology to finally restore his identity. Family members described him as a large, gentle man who loved the sea and was proud of his service in the military. Ironically, they called him Mousy. Now, here's one critical detail. Lahti was never formally reported missing. Family contact just simply stopped around 1965. That absence of a missing person file is one of the reasons earlier database searches failed. Now let's look at the timeline. After the identification, investigators learned more. According to family accounts, the last time anyone remembered seeing Lahti alive was after an argument at a bar in Newport, Oregon, somewhere around 1965. He had left that bar carrying a rifle. No one has publicly named the other party in that dispute, and the exact circumstances of his death, of course, remain under investigation. The Coos County Sheriff's Office has reopened the homicide case and is actively seeking information about that night. Lahti's associations in 1965, his vehicle, and his boat, they're all looking at that. Now, for decades, identification efforts stalled. So in 2014, DNA was uploaded to CODIS with no matches. Later attempts at more advanced testing also failed because the DNA was just too degraded. In 2025, the Coos County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit, working with the Volunteer Oregon Cold Case Collective Unit and the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office, submitted evidence to a private lab named Ortham. Ortham produced a usable single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNP as they refer, profile. And that profile showed that the man was 100% Finnish ancestry. The FBI then used forensic genetic genealogy to generate leads. Family reference samples confirmed the match. And the public announcement came in late July of 2026, so just a week ago, guys. Now, there's one more important point, and there's a larger national pattern here. Investigative genetic genealogy and specialized DNA labs are steadily converting decades-old unidentified remains into named victims and reopening cases. Many of these victims were never listed as missing, and many had no close living relatives actively searching. So the technology is closing gaps that traditional methods simply could not. Now, it doesn't automatically produce a suspect, and in Lahti's case, the killer or killers have not been publicly identified. But the first and most basic question, who was this man, has now been answered. Now, the Coos County Sheriff's Office continues to investigate this case and is asking anyone with information to contact investigators. Even after all these years, a single piece of information could help explain what happened and bring this investigation one step closer to justice. Now, this case also reminds us how dramatically forensic science has evolved. Technologies that didn't exist in 1972 are now helping investigators identify victims, reconnect families, and reopen cases that were once thought impossible to solve. Every identified victim represents more than a scientific achievement. It's the restoration of a person's identity, a family's history, and the recognition that every victim deserves to be remembered by name, not simply as John or Jane Doe. Now, if you found this analysis helpful, please consider following, subscribing to Crime Stats Daily. Each week, we examine the facts, the statistics, and the stories behind crime in America using reliable data and credible research. That's the case of Armes Henry Lahti, unidentified for 54 years, named in 2026. We'll keep following developments if new information emerges. Let me know your thoughts about this case, and please drop your comments in the comments section below. Stay informed, stay aware, and stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.